Continuing from where we left off with this fourth iteration, I'm now going to take some interest in adding some accessories to the braids, which I'll call hair charms. These braids will have pieces of, say, jewelry that follow along in the path that they draw out. Also, I want to assess the fade. It needs to be upgraded to reflect maybe some frizz that would go naturally with the type of hair in the braids. Since I had already worked on frizz with the vellus hairs, I'm just going to copy and paste the hair clump and guide process set length nodes to pipe into the end of step 3, using the output of the guides from the guide process node 34 to go into the hair clump. I can already see that I have a good start for a variety of hair, and I will now use this as my fade out to get started. Looking back with the head, I could see there's a lot of interpenetration inside, so this is a bunch of groom that will be lost and not visible. This is only a start to the solution of this fade. I'm going to place it here for now and come back and work on it later. To place the hair charms, I want to continue working from the guide clump centers. First, I'm going to try to build a simple piece of jewelry. I will start with a tube in which I will adjust the axis to be in the Z, as that is the forward direction of the curves. And then I'll add a poly extrude and bring out the surface just slightly. With the output back turned on, I now have a completed tube with 3D geometry, and adding a poly bevel, I could smooth out this form so it looks less faceted. With this ring, I'm going to add a little decorative figure on the top of it. To do this, I will use a new node for Houdini 21, Lab Simple Shapes. This gives you the power of graphic design primitives that you'd find in other softwares like circles, stars, rectangles, etc. And now you can have this as geometry in Houdini. All I need to do is take this Lab Simple Shapes, maybe select, for example, the star or the double star, and add a poly extrude to bring it out and make it 3D. I'll output the back as before to seal the shape in, and then plug it into the first input if a match size, so that if I use the justify Y with the second input coming from the tube, I can now set the triangle or the star to land on top of the ring. Merging this match size with the poly bevel of the tube, I can see what the shapes will look like combined. I can now pick another type of shape, adjust the scale to my liking, and now change the match size settings to justify our Y's minimum of object to the maximum of the second incoming object. Now I have a star that rests directly on top of the tube. I don't want these tubes to be perfectly cylindrical, so I'm going to flatten them out slightly by adding a transform to the end of this tree, and then scaling the X and the Z to both be 1.5. I have a shape that looks like it's been crimped. And now I'm going to use a copy to points to see what this shape looks like when pasted at every single point along the guide clump centers. Before I pipe it into the second input of the copy to points, I'm going to add a resample so that I can create a curve view attribute, which I'm going to use with some vex code in order to choose where these ornaments will land. Also, an orient along curves can help describe in what direction they should be pasted as they are put along the length of the curve. The x-axis will be set to the up attribute. And now with the point wrangle, I'm going to quickly enter in a p-scale attribute that is smaller than 1 so that I don't have enormous ornaments landing on the curve. I'll give this p-scale a sliding channel, which can be expressed with ch for channel, open parenthesis, quote, and then the name of the slider that I want to generate, which will be charm underscore scale, end quote, close parenthesis, semicolon. If I hit the update interface button, I now have the slider. Every single point of the curve now has this charm. I want to change my copy to points to pack an instance. This is not just to simplify the amount of geometry that is being placed, but it is in case I want to deform shapes later. I do not want the shape of the tube deforming. I just want its location being moved. I'm not done with this wrangle, but the kind of code that I want to add is evading me at the moment. A handy little tip or trick that I like to use is adding a group expression node, which allows you to select some presets of point selection and primitive selection, and then generate the code to see what should be typed into these snippets for wrangles. To try this out, I'm going to add a wire outside of the oriented long curve and use a group expression node to see what is the code for creating random selection. In the Generate Code tab, I can hit Update Code and now copy and paste this line into my attribute wrangle and adjust the variables and the values the way I see fit. First of all, I don't want my group to be called Group 1, so I'll call it Charm Points. Secondly, I recognize that it's using the element number, and I do know that we're running over points, so I'll change this to the attribute point number. And lastly, instead of saying 0.3, I'll add in a new channel slider to be called %chance. Clicking the Update Parameters button, I now have this slider, and I can see that if the target points is only pasted to the charm points in the Copy to Points node, that dragging the %chance reduces and increases the amount of points used to copy the charms. Next, I want to add in some more code that will add a seed to this random. So within that random expression, I'm going to add in another channel slider, which I will call seed. This changes the input into the random function, and now I can see that with the same amount of charms, I can also change their placement using the seed slider. Now, continuing to build up, I'm going to use the ampersand to make the group charms attribute take in some more ideas of code before it actually groups all the points together. And this new expression will be to work with the curve U. If I know that the curve U would be greater than a channel slider or channel float, which I'll define, then I can determine at what place along the curve the points in the group should start. So I'll give it the name start length. Updating, as I drag up, I can see points are disappearing from the start of the curve and only ending up at the bun. As I know that the very first point in curve U is always 0, and I know that my slider starts at 0, I want to include this, so I'll make it greater than equal to the channel slider. Similarly, I'm going to define where the end points should belong. I'm going to add another ampersand and then use the attribute curve U to say less than equal to a channel slider, which I will name as the end length. Updating the parameter interface again, I have a slider for how far should the points in the end of the curve go to be added to this group of charm points. Now I can dial in where they should start, where they should end, the amount, the seed, and even the scale of my charms. All of these charms are still being procedurally placed along the curves of the guide clump centers. Now it's time to test this against the Groom and see if these line up properly. First, I'll create a null to make a new output to match with the corresponding object merge, which will be in. This null is out charms, therefore the object merge for the geometry handling will be called in charms. As this is a new solution, I'll give it a network box and call it step 12 charms. I no longer need my group expression node, so I'm just going to disable it. The charms are there, but they're too small to be seen against the braids. Using my attribute wrangle, the charm placement, I'm going to adjust the charm scale slider. And now I can see these charms lining up perfectly with the braids. Changing the sliders as I see fit, I'm going to adjust the placement until I am pleased with the outcome. It's time to return to the fade, in which I have these curly hairs that are penetrating the scalp. I want to see if I can make a slightly different solution to this, as I don't like that most of my Groom is straddling the surface on either side, and lots of it is being hid from view. To start, I'm going to bypass the guide initialize, which has bent the hairs down towards the scalp, and just work with the regular hair gen, in which case all the hairs grow out and away from the scalp. With my guide process node number 118, I can try sliding up and down on the scale factor. Great, that was the problem. The guide initialize had the hairs bending down, and with that curl, they were spiraling back and forth along the inside and outside of the scalp. This looks ideal, with the hairs growing straight out from the scalp, and it's also logical. Lastly, to change the look of the entire groom, as there are some repeating patterns, I'm just going to add a mount node right after the merge, in which all the object merge items of hair have been input. The amplitude works directly with the element size, so I'm going to change the amplitude to reference this channel using channel open parenthesis, quote, element size, end quote, close parenthesis, and multiply by 0.25. Dialing down the element size to 0.1, I can see there's still a lot of deformation, but adding a 0 after the decimal place to 0.01, I have just enough breakup so that the braid pattern does not look like it's a replication of itself. Turning it on and off, I could see a bit of patchiness in the fade, which is perfect, and I could see also that the braids have a bit of that randomness and no longer an equal amount of thickness throughout the groom. That's the kind of variety I like right there, with the element size finally setting at 0.005. Now with a little bit of look development for the face, I'm just going to add a subdivide before I output the head, and also include a normals node. The subdivide and the normal node at their defaults will work just fine for smoothing out the face and making it look good under the current lighting. Now using the switch node to turn the face back on, I can see the groom holds its place, the face returns, and the viewport hitting V, and then shading options and going to smooth shaded, I can see the face and the hair groom, and everything is looking perfect. Lastly, I would like to build a turntable, but this completes the lessons for the 4th iteration and previous iterations. I hope you enjoyed this study, and I hope you have learned something and can appreciate hair grooming in Houdini with all of its procedural options, simulation effects, tool building, and versatility of nodes. Thank you for watching.